From the field to the film room to the war room, we've got you covered every step of the way as the road to the draft starts right now. Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 52 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by The Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've seen him on the Tough Cover Pod. It's Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at @MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Busy time of the sports calendar. I feel like I say that all the time, but busy time of the sports calendar. March Madness is coming to a close with the Final Four. The NBA, we're nearing the playoffs. Obviously, WrestleMania this weekend is the biggest news. And then, obviously, we've got everyone's favorite holiday that's listening to this, the NFL draft coming up. So, we're closing in. How many days are we away now? I think we're closer than a month now to the NFL draft at this point.
Yeah, the NFL draft is on. I'm stalling because my calendar won't swipe.
It's the end of April
because it's on my calendar.
Yeah, it's the end of April.
It is April 28th, 29th, and 30th. So the 28th, it goes live at 8 Eastern, which is a Thursday night. And then Friday, it goes live at 7 Eastern for rounds 2 and 3. So, and we're planning to have a live stream. Those of you that joined us last year, we had a live stream, a watch party. It had Mark and I and some of the other guys from the Painted Lines on camera. You basically just watch us instead of the draft because we're more entertaining anyways. So just talking about the picks as they rolled in, and we're hoping to kind of improve upon that last year. Actually, NFL draft was where this podcast was born. Mark and I were running something together last year. The draft was the first thing we covered together, and the podcast kind of stemmed from that. So we're coming up on 1 year of our podcast getting kicked off, and we're at episode 52, and we're going to keep you going all the way to the draft. We do have a great show lined up for you guys today. We're talking about the tight end class, the top 5 tight end prospects, and this is an interesting class. It is not a very good class, and we're going to get into it. We don't anticipate spending a ton of time, honestly, talking about these tight ends, but we are going to be talking about some of the biggest trades, some of the biggest signings in the offseason, maybe even get a reaction to the new NFL overtime rule. But first things first, we are going to dive into our tight end rankings here. And so if you are watching live, be sure to drop us some comments. Let us know what you think about these guys. We'd love to interact with you guys. So, Mark, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. I mean, this is a weak class, in my opinion, like Shane said, but I do think I've kind of found some value in it, I think, now that I didn't even think there was in there before, now going through it with a little bit more of a fine-tooth comb. So, but number 5 is not very exciting. I have Jake Ferguson at number 5. He's a tight end out of Wisconsin. This guy's a day 3 pick, in my opinion, but I think he's a guy who's going to stick in the NFL, and I think he's a guy who's going to be a solid backup tight end who can block and catch a couple passes when necessary. And he's a guy who's got great hands. He's really sure-handed. This guy is a good red zone target, a good third down target. He's not going to ever be more than a 40-catch guy. Last year was his best year at Wisconsin with 46 catches, 450 yards, and 3 touchdowns. But, yeah, he's probably just a solid backup tight end, but I'm in comparison to some of the other guys that I was looking at to round out this top 5. He was the guy I was most sure that would stick in the league.
Yeah. Mr. Crockpot chimes in on YouTube and asked, did Shane get a haircut for the tight ends? He's looking sharp. I got a haircut because we went to go visit my parents over the last weekend, and they told me I looked like a bum, and I think my wife took it personally. So my wife does my haircuts. I haven't paid for a haircut in like 10 years. So she cuts my hair, trims my beard, all that, and I think she took offense. So here we are, looking sharp for the tight ends. My tight end number 5 is a guy that we're going to have a conversation about. And it's Jilani Woods out of Virginia. Now, I firmly believe I'm going to talk myself into being higher on this guy by the time we get to the draft. Because to be honest, I'm fascinated with this guy's potential. Last year at Virginia, he hauled in 44 receptions for 598 yards, 13.6 yards per reception. He had 8 touchdowns. Not eye-popping stats. What's eye-popping is when you look at this guy. He is 6'7". He ran a 4.61 40 at the combine, which comes in with a 10.0 relative athletic score. That is on a 10-point scale, by the way, which means he is the best athlete at the tight end position in the history of the combine. So just something, if you're going to take a flyer in a not great tight end class, maybe you do it on the best athlete to ever play the position. Just a thought. He was a quarterback in high school, and he actually went to Oklahoma State. I thought the name sounded familiar when I started hearing stuff about Jilani Woods, and I didn't realize it till I went to go look him up. But he went to OSU to be quarterback.
You love Oklahoma State. You're a big
Oklahoma
State guy.
I'm not, but it's in my family, and I watch a lot of Big 12. But he went there to be a quarterback. He transitioned to tight end, and then he left OSU when he was underutilized. So he's new to the position, so he's raw in a lot of aspects of the technique of the position. He can struggle to create separation with his cuts and routes, but his speed still gets the job done. Like, he may not beat a guy out of a cut, but he can beat you running in a straight line. So he's especially good up the seam on crossing routes. He's got 34.5-inch arms. He's got a 37.5-inch vertical. You combine all that with his height, that means you can put a ball a little over 11 feet up in the air and he can go up and get it. And that's just insane to me. Like, what defensive back is going to be able to go up and make a play on that ball? What linebacker is going to be able to do that? He's a good blocker from what I can see. Maybe not good in like pass protection, but it at least takes a long time to run around him. Like, he doesn't whiff. And he's got a really high football IQ, which comes from that QB background. He knows how to attack leverage as a receiver to create separation because he knows how to throw against leverage as a quarterback. And so this is a guy that I really, really like. And when I first started looking at him, I thought he'd probably be a day 3 pick. I don't think he's going to be a day 3 pick. And I think I'm going to end up higher on him by the time we get to the draft. I love this guy. I would love to see this guy in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I'll talk about him in a little bit because I have a funny little anecdote on him, a personal anecdote, I guess. So, but we'll get to a guy that I think is also an interesting conversation. I don't think he's on your list. I might be incorrect there, but at number 4, I have Jalen Weidermeier. I'm the worst pronunciator in the draft industry. But Jalen Weidermeier from Texas A&M, he was a junior, 6'5", 255, but this guy was a guy coming into last year who people thought was going to, his first 2 years as a freshman, he had 32 catches for close to 500 yards and 6 touchdowns, 14 yards per catch. The next year, 46 catches for 506 yards, 6 touchdowns again, but the yards per catch less at 11. So you didn't see that improvement year 1 to year 2, but he was still a highly touted prospect coming to Texas A&M. And then in the 3rd year, he just didn't improve. And, people expected him to. His quarterback did get hurt last year at Texas A&M, and so he had pretty bad quarterback play. And he only had 40 catches for 515 yards, 13 yards per catch, and only 4 touchdowns in his 3rd year at Texas A&M. But really, the story with him has nothing to do with what happened in the year. The story with him has to do with the post-draft or the pre-draft process, and it's been terrible for him. He ran over a 5 in the 40. He's tested out. I think he's like a 1.8 or like a 1.9 on the RAS or something crazy in the 10-point scale that you just mentioned, with Jilani Woods being a 10. Jalen Weidermeier was the exact opposite. So he's an interesting case. It seems like he's going to be a day 3 pick now. Maybe he's someone you gamble on and just say, I don't believe in how bad the pre-draft stuff is, and you can look at some stuff and get excited about it from college, especially in the days that he had with Kellen Mond, and especially really his freshman year was really the best he ever looked. But yeah, I'm definitely a lot less excited about Weidermeier now than I was coming into the draft process.
Yeah, he is not on my list, partially because of that 40 and his combine stuff, and then partially just because I didn't want to try to say his last name, but. No, he's a guy, and I don't buy into the combine making or break. I think we overvalue the combine, but yeah, when you show up and you run over a 5-second 40, if you're getting outrun by offensive linemen, defensive linemen, that's just not ideal. And maybe you bounce back from that, but that was one of my biggest concerns with him, was just his athleticism. So My number 4 is going to be a guy that I don't think is on your list. It's Jeremy Ruckert out of Ohio State. And this is going to give you an idea of to how good this class is. Jeremy Ruckert had 26 receptions for 309 yards this year, 3 touchdowns, and he's on my list in my top 5. In his career, he's only got 615 receiving yards in 4 years. He played 1 game as a freshman, 9 as a sophomore, 5 as a junior with the COVID season, and 11 this year. Only 615 yards. Now, he did go to Ohio State. And we all know Ohio State has a ton of weapons in the passing game. So he was out, he was overshadowed by his wide receivers. He was behind the trio of Jackson Smith and Jigba, who will probably be wide receiver 1 next year.
100%.
Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, all these guys are going to be first-round picks. He was really their 5th option, but he had a 110 QB rating when he was targeted. So he was effective with limited targets. He is a red zone threat. All 5 touchdowns in his career came on red zone passes, and he might have some of the best tight end hands in the class. He makes highlight reel catches. If you put up a highlight reel of him, there's a lot of jumping one-handed catches, stuff like that. He has an NFL frame. He's got that body. He's an enthusiastic blocker, and one of the biggest things is he executes combo blocks really well in the running game, where the tight end and the offensive tackle, they'll both get hands on the defensive end, and then he'll brush off once that's secured and he'll move up to the second level. He's really good at that. So I think he can help a team right away with his blocking ability. And I think he projects to be a good receiver. So I see a path onto the field for him as a rookie, particularly in a kind of a run heavy team. And I think that receiving potential is there. It's just a lot of projection for a guy that didn't have much production in college.
Yeah, I also think he got hurt. I believe at his pro day or at the combine, he ended up in a boot walking out. So that's a concern. And there's definitely been. It seems like a lot of these tight ends have hurt themselves a little bit in their pre-draft process. That's a guy that I think was considered pretty much a lock as a day 2 pick when the draft process started, and I don't know if he's there anymore. But now we have my number 3 guy, which I had as Jilani Woods. So it's funny. Yesterday, I texted Shane to change this and to move Jilani Woods up from 4 to 3. And then about a half hour ago, I realized that, I have Jilani Woods number 2. So this guy's, every time I look up anything more on Jilani Woods, I start liking him even more for a lot of the reasons that Shane laid out. And one of the things that I saw in terms of the Oklahoma State stuff in his years at Oklahoma State before he went to Virginia, he played 1,500 snaps and only got 31 catches. So basically, like I saw a Packers blog was saying that they basically used him the same exact way that Matt LaFleur uses his tight ends, and basically just being blockers like Mercedes Lewis did there. So that shows that I think Jelani Woods, the measurables, the athleticism, and even the tape, like some of the times where he's running people over and he's a huge touchdown target, like there's things on tape that tell you, this guy could be a serious pass catcher. But beyond that, before he was a pass catching threat and before he transferred to Virginia, he was basically a blocking tight end. That was what his role was at Oklahoma State. So he has both sides of that. And that's kind of the stat. That little tidbit about him at Oklahoma State is kind of the thing that I saw today that made me want to rank him even higher and put him second and right behind my number 1 guy, to be honest. But I have the guy that you're about to talk about, or I'll finish my thing on Jelani Woods. But Jelani Woods, like you said, he had a 10-point athletics score, and that's the best that's ever been graded. And you even break it down beyond the overall package. His vertical jump would have been the best that's ever graded among tight ends. His broad jump would have been the best that's ever graded among tight ends. His 40 time, I think would have been the best this year among tight ends. So it's crazy how well the measurables have played out for Jelani Woods. You mentioned it. This guy could have been a day 3 pick and maybe a fringe day 3 pick. It now seems like he's locked in as a day 2 pick. And I even saw him mocked somewhere on a site I won't give any free ads to, but I saw him mocked as the 26th pick in the first round to the Titans. So that's crazy that this guy's rise has been that, that steady. It seems like Jelani Woods is a guy Dives has been hyping for a while. I wish Dives was here to talk about him, but he's been hyping Jelani Woods, telling us, watch Jelani Woods for a while. And now that I've officially really went through the Jelani Woods package, Yeah, I'm in. Like everything I see, I kind of get more in on. But the next guy, I'll just kind of kick it off because we all, I have Isaiah Likely at number 2. You have Isaiah Likely at number 3. I'd probably bump Likely to 3 and put Jilani Woods at 2. I don't have too much to say on Likely, so I'll kind of let you take over. The reason that you get excited about Likely is the receiving. I mean, he 912 yards, 12 touchdowns. He did do it at Coastal Carolina. He did do it as a senior. So, I'm not as excited about Likely as I was, I guess, 2 weeks ago. He didn't grade out all that well. I believe he ran. I don't have it right in front of me, but I think he ran over a 4.8.
I think it was a 4.8 flat. It was a 4.83 relative athletic score.
Yeah, so that's a guy who looked athletic. It seemed like a trait of his that would have helped him would be the athleticism, and to see that not come through is definitely concerning, especially coming from Coastal Carolina. So you do get nervous that maybe he'll be a little overwhelmed at the next level, but there is definitely stuff there on film that tells you this guy, I mean, is a good receiver. He's a solid receiver with good fundamentals. I don't know if he'll ever be a blocker. He wasn't a great blocker in college. So I would end up having Likely at 3 and Jelani Woods at 2, but I'll let you take over on Likely.
Yeah, he's, like you said, he's had over 900 yards receiving. He had, where I have it written down here, 15.5 yards per reception, 12 touchdowns. He ran a lot of vertical routes at Coastal Carolina, and he looked fast on the tape. He just runs away from defenders. Now, it's Sunbelt defenders. So when you show up to I don't think he ran at the combine. I think it was a pro day he went to. He runs a 4.8. That's concerning. It's like, well, is he really fast and he had bad runs that day? Because that happens all the time. Or is he just slow and he was playing against slow Sunbelt defenders? I don't have the answer to that. And I would need the answer to that before I would draft him. So I'm operating on the assumption the truth is somewhere in the middle, that the guy doesn't have elite athleticism, but he's not quite 4.8 slow. If he is, I would move him down quite a bit. But he's a balanced tight end that's raw in a lot of areas. He was used a lot of ways by Coastal Carolina. They used him as a tight end. They used him in the slot. They even used him as an outside wide receiver, and they would put him in the backfield as an H-back from time to time. He ran a lot of seam routes, a lot of vertical routes. He was good at tracking deep balls, good at securing catches in traffic. When they would split him out wide to the boundary, he ran a lot of slants. That was kind of his thing. The get out wide, use your big body, run slants, shield guys off. I thought he was a pretty good blocker. Coastal Carolina used him. A lot of times they would put him in the backfield in motion as an H-back and make him become the lead blocker on the boundary. Or they would put him outside and they would use him as a blocker for screens. Now, obviously, blocking a corner is a little different, but it takes some athleticism to be able to get hands on a corner to block him on those screens for a big guy. So I thought he was a pretty good blocker. Ultimately, it all just comes down to that athleticism for me. That's a question I would need answered. I would want to see that. I'd want to see him in a workout. If I was a GM, if I'm a scout, I would want to see him in person at a workout to get a better handle on what his athletic, that's not even a word, what his athletic ceiling is.
No, yeah, I think that's definitely when you're drafting a guy based on athletic traits and the athletic traits don't come through really, that's definitely something to be concerned about. But who's your number 2 guy?
So my number 2 is Greg Dolcich out of UCLA. This is a guy that Dibes is high on as well. Mm-hmm. I believe he had him ranked number 2. And Dibes couldn't be here today. I forgot to mention that. But he also had Jalen Weidermeier at 4, Isaiah Likely at 3. Actually, Dibes and I match on our top 4. And he had K. Otten, a guy that neither of us has, as his 5. So you can go check out his video on YouTube where he shows some highlights and talks briefly about each of these guys. But he wasn't able to make it with us today. But Greg Dolcich is a guy that Dibes put me on, that I got onto his film. He's from UCLA. Had 42 receptions for 725 yards this year, 17.3 yards per reception, which is very high for a tight end. Pulled in 5 touchdowns. That's his best season in college. He ran a 4.69 40 at the pro day. It translated to an 8.17 relative athletic score. I think Dolcich has good hands. He's got the toughness to win in contested catch situations. Unlike a lot of these tight ends, though, he's a great route runner. He played wide receiver. He's got that in his background. And so he's able to create separation in and out of cuts in his routes. He's really good at that. Probably the best tight end in the class at that. He's got really good situational awareness of, the sticks, getting to the first down marker. He reads and reacts well in scramble drill situations. He's just got a high football IQ. Now, that said, the negative for him is he is not a good run blocker. He is a willing blocker. He just he can't do it. He needs to add strength and blocking technique at the next level to be used as a blocker. So until that happens, he's going to have to be your tight end too. He's going to have to be flexed out into the slot. I don't think this is a guy that can play in line early in his career. So I think it limits his upside early on. He does have big playability after the catch, as evidenced by that 17 yards per reception. He can make guys miss, he can run over you, and he can get some yardage with the ball in his hands, which is always nice for your tight end. Ultimately, that inability to block, though, is why he's going to be my number 2. And honestly, as I talk about it more, I might end up sliding him down some more before I get done.
Yeah, it's a hard position to rank. I mean, this is not one that you can hold us to in a couple weeks when we do our official overall big boards. But for now, this is where we're at. And I think we can move on to number 1, where we both have the same guy. And I think most people have kind of gravitated towards this at this point, with Trey McBride being the number 1 tight end. Dibes also has him number 1. And this is a guy who has helped himself a lot, like Jilani Woods has in the pre-draft process. Ran a 4.53 at his pro day, and they asked the scouts if he should run a second time, and the scouts were like, "No, we're good. We're good on that first one. We saw what we needed to see." But yeah, he looked awesome in his pro day, according to everybody. He has the most catches by a tight end since 2019 with 158. He had 90 catches last year, which is the best single season you'll see out of any of these prospects, really, that you're looking at. He did do it in the Mountain West, but that's not a terrible conference. It's not like the Sun Belt. I do think that it's a good step up from the Sun Belt, but he had 1,121 yards. A little weird. He only had 1 touchdown. He did have 4 touchdowns the 2 years prior to that per year. But Trey McBride, I mean, you have to be a little bit excited about, I think this is a guy who could sneak into the first round because he's kind of that new era type of tight end where, he's the type of guy that you can split out wide. He's the type of guy that you can use as just a pass catcher instead of just a tight end, but he can block pretty well too. So, I mean, this is a guy who attacks zone coverages. I mean, I think he's a guy he's a pretty smart receiver when you watch him, and I think it'll translate next level pretty soon. I came in thinking that there was no tight end that would be in my top 50 in terms of overall. I think McBride will be right there. I think he'll be in the mid 40s to mid 50s.
Yeah, he was Colorado State's offense. He was targeted on 30% of his routes run. That's just insane. He was very versatile, like you said. They used him out at the boundary, out wide. They used him in the slot. They used him in line. I think he's the only tight end in this class that you can count on to consistently beat both man and zone coverage. Like he's good in his routes. He's got good transitions into his cuts, things like that. He's good at sitting in soft spots in zone coverage. He diagnoses that. Mm-hmm. He's got really good hands. He transitions from receiver to runner smoothly. He gets the ball, he catches with his hands, gets the ball tucked, and he moves upfield. He kind of, once he's got the ball in his hands and he turns upfield, he kind of looks like a running back to me. Like he's got that mentality. He's always looking to initiate contact, always looking to fall forward. And he gives strong effort in the running game as a blocker. He's got plenty of pancakes on his tape if you go look at it. Now, he does struggle to sustain blocks if he doesn't win them immediately. But, as a run blocker, that's not a huge deal. You just can't get those instant losses. And so I like McBride. I wouldn't take him in the first round. I would consider him in range of like the high second round, but he is intriguing. He's the most intriguing is Jilani Woods, but in terms of refined guy, this is the guy that you want if you want somebody to come in and be your starting tight end right away as a rookie.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah,
I think that Joe
Ciccoletti, yes, as a potential second round or third round pick for the Packers there. I'd be really surprised if McBride makes it to the third round, but I would love, that'd be a good fit to put him in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers and just he's the guy out of this class I feel like you could rely on at the tight end position.
I'll say this. I think there's a chance they take him at 28. I think there's a chance they take him in the first round. And if they don't take him, like I said earlier with that Jilani Woods comparison where Packers fans were saying that he was playing the same role as Mercedes Lewis when he was at Oklahoma State, I think they would take a shot at Jilani Woods in the set one, day two, if they don't get Trey McBride. But the Packers, I mean, losing MVS, losing Devontae Adams, which could be a nice little segue to our next conversation, maybe. But with those losses at pass catcher for Green Bay, they're absolutely gonna. I think they're going to draft a receiver with one of those two first-round picks. I know that they don't do that very often in Green Bay to Aaron Rodgers' dismay, but I do think they'll do that, and I think they'll add a tight end on day one or day two. So I think that's a good call from Joe Chick.
I think I read that they only have one wide receiver on their roster right now that wasn't a UDFA. But
that's insane.
So, yeah, we're going to throw it over to some other conversation here. Before we do, let's talk honorable mentions. Mark, did you have anybody else that you didn't fit into your top five that you wanted to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on Jeremy Ruckert, who was probably the main one that didn't make it in, that, I wanted to try to get in there, but it didn't happen. I'll mention Cole Turner. He's a guy from Nevada, 6'6" guy, so you're always interested in that size. 62 catches, 677 yards, and 10 touchdowns. People think he might be a little bit of like an H-back instead of a tight end, so that always kind of turns me off with these types of tight ends. I think that H-backs are kind of, the way of the past a little bit in the NFL. So those were some of the guys, and then I know you had another guy that I was going to touch on.
Yeah, so the other guy I wanted to mention was Charlie Kohler out of Iowa State. He had 62 receptions for 756 yards this year and 6 touchdowns. He was a combine winner at 6 foot 6 inches tall. He ran a 4.62 40, which was a 9.12 relative athletic score. And anytime I get into day 3 range, I'm just looking for guys with elite athleticism tools that you can work with. He's got some of the best hands in the class, only a 3% drop rate since 2019. He does have really stiff hips, and he can't really get out of his cuts very well. So against man, he basically is going to win on crossing routes, outrunning linebackers over 30 or 40 yards. He's a better guy against zone. He can get where he wants to be and sit down. Mm-hmm. He's good at tracking the ball deep downfield, and he's good at contested catches. He's a truly terrible blocker. I think it's mostly due to technique. It's not a lack of effort, but he carries his weight too high. Similar to the issues with getting in and out of his routes, he can't sink his – I won't say he can't. He doesn't sink his hips, so he can't anchor. So he's a terrible blocker. You don't want to use him there. You could maybe get that technique. It would probably help him in his route running too, to where he could be passable. But this isn't like Dallas Goedert coming into the draft and people were like, oh, he can't block because he was never asked to, and they just assumed he couldn't. Like, it's on tape, Kohler trying to block, and it's bad. But I think he's an early day 3 type of guy. Just for those athletic traits. I mean, it's always worth taking a flyer on a guy that has that elite athleticism. So he's a guy that I wanted to mention.
Dives has one that's, of course, hard to pronounce, but Chiga Kongwu, I think that's a shortening of his first name. I think he's got a longer first name than that. But, out of Maryland. He's a guy I actually saw when I was researching this, and he's a guy that I know that a couple NFL teams have had him for top 30 visits. I know the Ravens were interested in him, and he was like, gushing over Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson quote tweeted it. So my prediction, Chiga Kongwu is going to the Ravens because of Twitter.
All right, there you have it. So by way of recap, from 1 to 5, Mark had Trey McBride, number 1. He switched it on me last second. Jelani Woods, number 2. Isaiah Likely, number 3. Jalen Weidermeier, number 4. Jake Ferguson, tied in 5. Dibes and I had the same top 3 here before it mixes up. We both went Trey McBride 1, Greg Dolcich 2, Isaiah Likely 3. I put Jeremy Ruckert, tight end 4, Jilani Woods 5. Dibes went Jalen Weidermeier 4, Cade Otton, tight end 5.
Just real quick, I think Jelani Woods should be personally offended that Dives didn't put him on this top 5 list. With how much Dives has talked about Jelani Woods, for Dives not to have Jelani Woods in the top 5, it's shameful, to be quite honest.
Says I'm always copying him. It's true. I just copied what he had, and then I made it better, and I put Jelani Woods up there because he definitely deserves to be there. So Dibes isn't here. He can't defend himself. So we can say whatever we want to. So that's going to wrap it up for the tight end portion. If you're not interested in the rest of it, you can tune out now, but we know you are. We know you want to hear this stuff. So we're going to go through and we're going to talk about some of the big moves in free agency. We haven't had a chance to do that. Some of the big trades. Now, we've already briefly touched on the Aaron Rodgers news and the Russell Wilson news. We're going to talk about some of the things that have happened since then. And so Mark alluded to it. Let's just start with the Green Bay Packers trading Davante Adams to the Las Vegas Raiders for a first and a second round pick. And then, of course, the Raiders signed him to a massive contract extension. Per PFF, Davante Adams was the fourth most valuable non-quarterback of the 2021 season. One of the other guys in that top three was his new teammate, Max Crosby, by the way. So apparently the Raiders have two of the top four non-quarterbacks in the NFL, according to PFF. Adams also reunites with his college quarterback, Derrick Carr. So for the Carr stands out there, and I know we're both fairly high on Derrick Carr.
Yeah,
this is a big year for him. He gets that, he gets that number one weapon. This should be a really good offense, and this is kind of a make or break year for Carr. I feel like if Carr with McDaniels and these new weapons, if they can't get it done, I just don't think it's going to happen for him.
But let's get it done. You know what I mean?
That's true. You bring up a good point because they go get Davante Adams, the best wide receiver in the NFL. They get a really good quarterback coach. I don't know if he's a good head coach, but a good offensive coordinator.
I think it's a good hire. Yeah.
Yeah. They get all this, and still, would anybody pick him to finish higher than last in their division?
You can make it. I actually think they'll finish in third. I'm not. We talked about Denver. I'm not high on the Denver situation. I just think it's going to combust, and I think it's going to be a last place team in that division. But I think the Raiders are going to be slightly worse than they were last year. In reality, I think they're probably going to be a little better than they were last year, but I think they had a lot of good luck, a lot of good fortune with their schedule, and they overachieved definitely last year, in my opinion, to get to the playoffs. And I think that might have given the Raiders a bit of a false bravado to think let's go make a move to trade a first and a second and pay Davante Adams, a number one wide receiver. I think he got the number one money until Tyreek Hill got a new contract. But Davante Adams got this huge contract, and you gave up your top two picks. They got a lot of holes. The Raiders have a lot of holes on that team. I don't know if the Raiders are a team that I would endorse going for it in this brazen of a fashion and trying to make a move to compete now when you have the Chiefs and Chargers ready to compete for a Super Bowl in your division, and you have the Broncos. Some people are higher on them than me, and that's just the division. We're not talking about the rest of the conference. The whole conference is try to pick your 7 playoff teams from the AFC right now, because it's impossible. You're going to be leaving someone out that you like no matter what. For me, I think I only had one team making it from the AFC North when I ran through it the first time in my head. And that's 4 teams that all have an over-under win total of 9.5. This AFC is going to be so fun to watch. It's so loaded. And I don't think the Raiders are making the playoffs even with this move. And I think the Packers are still fine. I think the Packers are still the class of the NFC North. And I think that they'll figure out ways to patch pass catchers around Aaron Rodgers. And, you mentioned Davante Adams being the 4th most valuable pass catcher. I think that that's a little bit dependent on Aaron Rodgers, though. So I do think that we'll see, how good Davante Adams really is. I think he'll still be very good. Will he be a no doubt slam dunk top 3 wide receiver year in and year out? Probably not. I'd argue probably not. So that'll be interesting to see. But I think this is probably a bit of an overpay for the Raiders and probably a good trade for the Packers, in my opinion, if you're getting a 1 and a 2 there. And I'm not going to sort through our podcast, or I don't know what podcast I said it on, because I said it all year last year. I said Davante Adams was going to the Raiders because of the Fresno State connection. Because last year in the offseason, they asked Davante Adams if he would give a hometown discount to the Packers, and he said no, but I might give a discount to go play with Derrick Carr again. And it was whoa, and no one picked up on it. But it's going to be quite interesting. That's a great point from Joe. Asking about the skill possessions, they'll be facing some of the best pass rushing duos in the league. They'll probably won't be able to block them. But he does think that this trade benefits Waller a lot. It benefits him in terms of on the football field in an actual football sense, probably not in terms of like numbers and fantasy stuff because they'll have less targets. But yeah, Waller's an awesome player. So, I mean, the Raiders have things to be excited about. There are definitely things to be excited about, but you have no picks or money to fill the many holes that you have at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So speaking of the AFC West,
sorry to go long there.
No, you're good.
That's the one I had the most on. Yeah.
Speaking of the AFC West and just how insane it is, the Chargers went out and they made a move too. They added Khalil Mack, trading a second-round pick this year and a future sixth-rounder to the Bears for Mack. So now you have Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack on the same defense. Now, Mack was hurt last year, but he was good the year before. If he can come off of that injury well, I don't know what you do against a Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack edge rushers if you're a team out there. But
well, you know what the worst part about it is for other teams?
What's that?
They went out and signed maybe the scariest cornerback in football as well, adding J.C. Jackson, which I think is an even bigger addition than Khalil Mack. And they still have Derwin James back there. The Chargers are winning the Super Bowl this year. I placed in my futures before the Khalil Mack news that they were going to win the AFC. And then when I put a unit on them at plus 1,600 at that point. And then the Khalil Mack news came out. I get the trade notification right away on my phone. I'm like, ooh, maybe DraftKings hasn't adjusted yet. Let me go get it again. And I got it at plus 1,600. An hour later, it was at plus 1,200. And then J.C. Jackson, a couple days later, gets signed. As soon as I get the notification, I hit it again at plus 1,200. Now I think it's down to like plus 800 or plus 900 to win the AFC. So I'm as invested on a future bet as I've ever been in my life now. I've got like 3 units riding on a long shot AFC championship bet. So I'm a Chargers guy now. I'm on the Herbert train. But it's not because of Herbert. I mean, obviously having a top 7 quarterback.
Oh, it's always because of Herbert.
It's definitely, I'm not going to lie. It definitely helps, but you could plug in like 7 to 10 quarterbacks right now into this team. And I think I'd feel pretty good about their chances. And you're obviously building in some hopeful progression for a young quarterback like Herbert. He should even continue to improve. So that's obviously a positive. They kept Mike Williams, but you mentioned it with Bosa and Mack. It reminds me a lot of what happened with the Rams last year. I really think that this Chargers Super Bowl run this year that they're going to go on, that I'm calling right now, around the same time last year, I called the same thing for the Rams. And I think we see the same things with the defense. Obviously, they added Von Miller in between in the regular season, and that was a big addition. And then we saw Aaron Donald got unleashed in that with him on the other side. I think we'll see the same thing with Khalil Mack. Maybe not just being a great player for the Chargers, but making Joey Bosa so much better. And J.C. Jackson, the best part about J.C. Jackson's addition to that defense, he's not just some like lockdown corner. Like, there's a lot of really good corners who are good in man, good in zone, whatever you want to say. J.C. Jackson's a playmaker. I saw a tweet when he got signed. He is what the NFL media tried to make Trayvon Diggs last year, because Trayvon Diggs was giving up all the yards, but he's making the plays. J.C. Jackson just makes the plays. He doesn't give up all the yards, doesn't give up all the big plays. I mean, he was the one guy that I was hoping the Eagles might, break out the wallet and try to go sign. But J.C. Jackson's the move of the offseason for me by far for me.
Yeah, you look at that division with the Chiefs being the Chiefs, the Chargers being the Chargers, and then you've got Devontae Adams to the Raiders, you've got Russell Wilson to the Broncos. Like, we're going to be watching a game from that division in primetime like every week. And it's going to be crazy to watch. And they can just give all of the NFC East primetime games to the AFC West, and it'll make for a lot better viewing experience for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, we just talked about it. Like, I don't think the Broncos are ready, but they definitely improved. I don't think the Raiders are on that Chargers-Chiefs level, but they definitely improved. And the Chiefs have, I think if you're just saying in terms of their roster for next year, I think it's probably worse. I don't know what they could do that would make me say, oh, their roster's better going into next year without Tyreek Hill. Maybe it's a smart move long-term. Who knows? But and then you look at the Chargers, and I think there's no doubt that they've improved themselves more than any team in football. So I think that, I'm inclined to say that the Chargers are now the class of the AFC West. And, I'm a Patrick Mahomes guy. Like, I'm a Chiefs. I've been saying the Chiefs are a dynasty, and, the Chargers are a nice little thorn in that dynasty now because I think that they have a better roster at this point. I mean, it's still Patrick Mahomes. He could still obviously just come out and win 13 games and just be better than the Chargers. But is the gap between Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert bigger than the gap between how good the rest of the Chargers roster is compared to the rest of the Chiefs roster? I don't know.
Yeah. So you mentioned Tyreek Hill. The Chiefs trade Tyreek Hill to the Dolphins for a first, second, and fourth rounder in this year's draft, a fourth and a sixth rounder in next year's draft. And then the Dolphins gave him a 4-year, $110 million deal. So two things I want to ask here. One, I mean, this is the second year in a row that the Dolphins have given up they gave it 2 first-round picks to go get Jalen Waddle last year. They traded their first and second this year to go get Tyreek Hill. What does this do to the Miami offense? Specifically, what does it do to Tua, in your opinion? And then we'll look at it from the Kansas City side, too. What do you think it does to Kansas City? But let's start with the Dolphins. What do you think this does to the Dolphins for next year?
It's pretty hypocritical of me to kind of tear apart that Devontae move and then have sing a completely different tune here with Miami, but that's what I'm going to do because I think that they have a lot more complete of a roster in terms of you look at the defense and you can get excited about things on all 3 levels. And then now if you look at offense, I think the only thing missing really for Miami is probably 1 or 2 more offensive linemen, maybe really 1 more, and then a running back. They need I'm not huge on investing in running back, but Miami's had, a lackluster running game for a really long time now. They haven't had a legitimate running back since I have to really think, I'm a fantasy guy, so I can think of these things.
Jay Ajayi.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, people thought it'd be Myles Gaskin for a little there. There was a guy in between. Was it Kenyon Drake? Yeah, Kenyon Drake, but he never really became what people thought that he could become in Miami as like a lead rusher. They haven't had that lead rusher in a long time. So they're a team that I do think they need to spend a day 2 pick. I don't even know how many picks they have, but they need to get a running back into the system, whether that be in free agency or the draft. But I think that there's so much to be excited about going into this year with Miami. I think Brian Flores is a good coach. I think he is going to overachieve and going to win, as many games as anyone's going to win with that roster. But Tua had 2 offensive coordinators in 2 straight years. This is obviously his 3rd offensive coordinator in his 3rd year, but I think this is the guy that you'd obviously be most excited about, any of the names that have coached him. Mike McDaniel, if you've watched him talk about football, it seems like this guy is just one of those geniuses. And there was that video of him and Belichick talking, and you could tell Belichick was picking his brain, like, what the hell is this kid talking about? Like you could tell Belichick was like, this guy's a genius, huh? Like, I don't know. It was just like a funny interaction, it seemed like. And I think Mike McDaniel is going to work wonders with Tua. He's going to work wonders with the fact that you have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, but you said it with Derrick Carr. And it's funny because we talked a lot about Tua this year on the pod. And I think at the beginning of the year, you were kind of with me being apologetic for Tua a little bit and saying he had a rough situation in his rookie year. And then throughout the year, you did get more negative. But I feel like since the offseason started, you've been like the king of the Tua Stinks fan club, or the Tua hater club. So I'm surprised that you don't think that, that this is, I mean, there's no excuses now for sure. But when you have 2 guys as fast as Waddle and Hill, and you're as accurate as Tua is in the short and intermediate routes, and you obviously do get the deep threat of them, he's got to hit some of those deep balls. But I think you can do so much. And you saw Mike McDaniel with Debo as a running back and all that stuff. I think you can do so much in this offense now with both threats of Hill and Waddle to help Tua out.
Yeah. Quick factoid here. The last 1,000-yard rusher that the Dolphins had was Jay Ajayi in 2016. Before they loaned him to the Eagles for their Super Bowl run. Prior to that, if you want to look at the last person they had to rush for 1,000 yards in 2 separate seasons, you'd have to go all the way back to Ronnie Brown. Yeah. Yep. Oh, no, wait. Yeah, Ronnie Brown.
And then Ricky Williams.
Oh, no, Ricky Williams did it once. Ronnie Brown did it once. Okay, yeah, Ricky Williams did it back-to-back in 2002 and 2003.
Yeah.
So it's been a while. Yeah, for Tua, I mean, I think it's an overpay. I think they gave up too much to go get Hill, especially when you don't know about your quarterback. But on the flip side, you're going to find out about your quarterback this year. There's no, I mean, unless he gets hurt or something, there's no way you can get to the end of the season and not be sure. So if this is what it takes for you to decide he's not our guy or he is our guy, then, maybe you look at it that way. I believe they still got 2 first rounders in next year's draft. So they can be in on that QB sweepstakes if they need to.
And they got Teddy Bridgewater to back up Tua. So if you see early on in the year that Tua doesn't look right and that Tua isn't playing well enough to support that roster, which it kind of reminds me of the Cleveland situation now last year, where I thought Cleveland had pretty close to a Super Bowl ready roster with a coach, an offensive minded coach in Stefanski that I really respected, and Baker held them back. Will it be the same thing with Tua and the Dolphins this year? I don't think so. I think Tua will game manage enough and will get the ball in the hands of his playmakers enough. And if it doesn't, it'll be Teddy Bridgewater, and Teddy Bridgewater will they could probably win 10 games with Teddy Bridgewater with this roster. So I think it's the team that could win 11 games next year with Tua.
So on the Kansas City side, I actually really like this move for the Chiefs. I think what you saw last year is teams devoting themselves to split field safety coverages, taking away the explosive plays and making the Chiefs drive down the field. Tyreek Hill had his lowest ADOT and his lowest yards per reception of his career last year. And so if you're going to limit his ability as a deep threat, if you take that off of the table, he's not worth that contract. And I think that's what teams were doing. And so for the Chiefs, I really love, go get Juju Smith-Schuster. Go get a guy that's really good underneath after the catch. I mean, not that Juju is going to replace Tyreek Hill. They definitely need to draft a receiver, but they've got 2 first-round picks, and they're in receiver territory. You can't pay Tyreek Hill what he just got paid when you're paying your quarterback $500 million over the next 10 years. And so for the Chiefs, they've got the quarterback. They've got him locked up. This isn't a Tom Brady thing where he's flirting with retirement. You've got to go all in now. You've got 10 years of Patrick Mahomes. They need to maximize that window. And I think that's what they did. You can't pay Hill what he got paid, and Kelsey and Mahomes. So I really like the move for the Chiefs rather than playing it out this year with Tyreek and then tagging him, playing the tag game and letting him walk. I like the move to go get some picks that they can use to build this roster better. And so do they take a small step back immediately? Yeah, I think so. But I trust Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes to be able to figure that out and to get the most out of 2 first and 2 second round picks to help build this team. So I really like this move for the Chiefs, to be honest.
I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate then, because I'm not a huge fan of the move. And I understand, when you're paying Patrick Mahomes, it changes the calculus of how you can construct your roster. But Tyreek Hill is the one guy who I would have figured out how to keep in terms of that calculus. I mean, I'd have to pull up their cap sheet, but I mean, they're paying a good amount to a couple defensive linemen. They're paying a good amount to a couple offensive linemen. They're paying a good amount to a couple players in the secondary. They're paying a good amount to Travis Kelsey, who I think we saw moments last year where it seemed like Travis Kelsey was aging. It didn't seem like Travis Kelsey was quite the peak best receiving tight end we've ever seen, or at least 1A, 1B with Gronk. I don't think that Travis Kelsey, I mean, he was great, but I don't think that he was the same exact player that we've seen in the past, at least for some stretches. And at least, especially during that Chiefs slump to start this year, it really seemed like Travis Kelsey got off to a slow start. And I think Tyreek Hill was always a bit more important to that offense than Travis Kelsey was. So I actually, I understand it and I get it, but I think Tyreek Hill's the one guy that I would have paid. And beyond that, if you're saying we're not going to pay him, I would have just played it out if I was them, to be honest. And I at least would have played it out up until the draft, because I don't understand how it became we're trading him and then we're going to decide right now between these 2 offers, and we're not going to let it ruminate a little bit for a couple weeks and try to get the best offer from the NFL. Like, it
was really weird how quickly that all happened.
It seemed like there was something going on that we don't know, and I still kind of feel like that might be the case. But I mean, the Jets, there was a rumor that they didn't even call the Jets back. There was an offer. I guess the Jets they were basically saying they were letting Tyreek Hill pick, apparently, where he wanted to go between New York and Miami. And as soon as you heard that, you knew he was going to pick Miami, if that was truly the case on where he could pick. But apparently the Jets didn't even get a call back from after that to up their offer or anything like that. So they weren't offering a first round pick at first. So they were just offering, I think their top, it was a second, a third, and a third. I'm shocked they didn't get a top 15 pick. And I think Tyreek Hill's worth a top 15 pick. Now I get it. What was the total package again?
4 years, 1-2-4 this year, 4-6 next year. And then he got paid 4 years, $120 million.
Yeah, I think that didn't they take a fourth back too for next year though? So it was like a swap. Like it's really like a 1 and a 2. I think it's a 1 and a 2, a swap, and then a sixth. I might be wrong there, but I get that that's a lot of draft capital. But you know me with whenever we're talking about day 3 picks, I just don't really value them because I think you can have them if you want them on day 3 generally. So I don't value them very highly. But it's a 1 and a 2, and I get that. I would value a top 15 pick if I was the Chiefs because you're not going to get a chance to get up there and get that type of blue chip talent very often. So I would have probably held out, and maybe even if that means let's trade one of our thirds and Tyreek Hill to get 7 or 10 from the Jets. Like, how do you not get the 10th pick from the Jets? Like,
I know a team that's sitting at pick 15 that'd be happy to take 29 and 30 to let you move up into the top 15.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. 29 and 30. That's a steep drop back. I would have to, if that's the case, I would have to feel pretty good about what my option. I guess you have the next pick right there at 16. Yeah, I would do that. Yeah. I would have to feel pretty good that they're not taking the guy I want to move up at 15, and I would have to.
Well, if they're taking a receiver, I mean, they almost have to now.
Yeah, you're right. That's fair. You're right. There's definitely some interest there. I have some interest there. The Green Bay will be interesting too. They've got a ton of picks now as well. So I think there's going to be a ton of first round pick trades, especially like 15 to 32. Like, I think it's going to be mayhem.
Yeah, which will make it a lot of fun for the draft show.
It'll be confusing for the draft show. That'll definitely be true.
Yeah, my pick graphics are going to be instantly outdated as the trades start flying. But all right, let's rapid fire a few more of these before we get out of here. Matt Ryan gets traded to Indianapolis for a third rounder. I've got a question for you. You're on the record saying Matt Ryan would never quarterback a team that was above 500. Do you still think that's true? Do you think he can get the Colts above 500?
I won't lie. I'm a little nervous because the corpse of Phillip Rivers did it. Carson Wentz did it last year. But Matt Ryan is cooked. That guy's a statue. I hate this move for Indy, and Philly fans are going to hate hearing this. Everyone's kind of praising what Indy did, and so what did they end up? They gave up 2 seconds for Matt Ryan, or they gave up 2/3 for Matt Ryan. I think the 1/3 can turn into a second. I'm not sure.
It was just a third. So they traded Wentz for 2/3, and then they got Matt Ryan for a third. So they basically traded Wentz for Matt Ryan and a third.
I don't like that move. And everyone's praising it, and everyone's saying how smart Chris Ballard is. And that's what everyone always does with Chris Ballard. Everything he does gets celebrated, and they throw a parade for how smart he is. Their quarterback position's been a nightmare for 4 years, and this is yet another Band-Aid. This is yet another refusal to address this long-term. And I get it. You're trying to – I say I get it way too much. But
the issue is they can't address it long-term because they gave up their first rounder this year for Carson Wentz and then ditched him after a year. Like – I don't know what's going on in that building because you have guys like Jonathan Taylor speaking out, talking about what a good teammate Carson Wentz is. So the narrative that he was just some awful teammate that's being pushed out by Ballard and Irsay, it doesn't line up. I don't know what's going on there, but if for whatever reason they had to get him out of the building, they had to do something, and it couldn't be the draft. But they should have never been back into this corner to begin with.
Allegedly, it's as simple as Irsay was pissed about the vaccination thing when Wentz didn't get vaccinated, and then he ended up missing a game, and then he came back and used COVID as an excuse when he played poorly, I think, in week 17. I think Irsay was pissed about that, and then apparently when the Jags beat them in week 18, he forced all of the coaching staff to come back and spend 12 hours grinding the tape of that game with him. And basically when everyone walked out of that meeting, everyone was like, oh, there's no chance that Carson Wentz could play quarterback here again with what we just heard from our owner. So I think that's short-sighted, and I think that's a decision that they made out of anger and a decision that they made, in haste. I don't think Carson Wentz was as bad last year as people want to think. If you look week 3 to week 15, he was a top 6 quarterback in the league. If you look at all the metrics that measure quarterbacks, he had a rough start to the year and he had a rough finish to the year. And I'm not saying he's some top 10 quarterback. He's better than Matt Ryan. I'm confident in saying that he's better than Matt Ryan. So I'll give you 2 hot takes before we move on. Colts missed the playoffs. I'm very confident in that. no shot that team's making the playoffs in a loaded AFC. And I hate to say it, but I think the Washington Commanders are going to win the NFC East.
See, I disagree with the second one. I don't think it'll happen. I think that's a dumpster fire organization.
Totally agree there.
And I don't think Wentz is going to fix their quarterback issue. In fact, I could see Wentz and Ron Rivera having issues, but we'll see. We'll see how that one plays out, and we'll see how the draft plays out a lot too. It kind of depends on how that falls as well.
I think I was going through the records. I was just doing some early stuff on win totals that just got released for the NFL. And I have them right here, actually. The Eagles are sitting at 9.5. And the Eagles are also sitting at 7th in terms of odds for the NFC. So Vegas thinks we're going to be exactly what we were last year, a 9-10 win team. That's a 7 seed that probably gets blown out.
Well, it is the exact same team. So, we're just running it back.
Vegas thinks, you're totally right. But the Eagles are at 8.5, actually. I'm sorry. They're at 8.5. Dallas is at 10 flat. Washington is at 7.5, and the Giants are at 7. I think the Giants are going to be bad again. I know that they just did Daniel Jones is still there. He's still the quarterback, so I think they'll be bad. But I think there's a good chance like the Cowboys, the Eagles, and Washington are all right around 9 wins. I ended up putting Washington at 10 and putting Philly and Dallas at 9 right behind them. But I think that it's going to be like a dogfight for the NFC East. And I think people are forgetting that, how many games did Washington end up winning last year with a ton of injuries and, a terrible start to the year, and Heineke at quarterback, who I like, but I think Wentz is a stark improvement there. And obviously 2 years ago, Washington's defense was fantastic and they were really good 2 years ago. So I think Washington's a lot better than people are going to give them credit for. And that 7.5 win total is something I already bet.
All right. Let's see. Bills signing Von Miller. That's a big one. 6 years, $120 million deal, which seems crazy, but
it's fake. Yeah.
It seems like it's fairly easy for them to get out of it later. And he obviously benefited from playing next to Aaron Donald last year, but he did have a 91.2 PFF grade, which was 3rd in the league. He's been graded over a 99 out of the last 10 seasons. So a boost to the Bills there, as they attempt to make a run deep into the playoffs and get their ever elusive Super Bowl.
Didn't they spend they spent a first and a second rounder last year on DNs, I believe, or they spent a second and a third maybe on DNs, and Rousseau was pretty good. So
didn't they get Rousseau and
Basham?
Basham, is that?
I don't know Basham. Yeah, I think it was Basham. I don't think he did much, but I think Rousseau was pretty good for them. But yeah, spending 2 picks on that and then going out and really, really overpaying for Von Miller, even if it is really only a 2-year deal, probably worth like $40 plus million. But it's an obvious move that you saw against Mahomes in the playoffs, that they need some help on defense. But yeah, I don't know. It doesn't get me all that excited, to be quite honest, in terms of it doesn't change the outlook for me on what the Bills are.
Looks like Rousseau started all 17 games and he had 4 sacks, 10 QB hits. I'm not seeing anything. Oh, Basham played in 8 games. He had 2.5 sacks, 3 QB hits.
Yeah, those were both kind of a bit of project picks too. Those were both DNs that had some, traits that you were excited about. Those were kind of long-term picks. So it could stunt the growth of those players, but Buffalo's not worried about that. They're trying to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, for sure. We got a few. Any of these other moves or trades that you want to mention before we?
Yeah, I mean, there was one on here real quick. Let me. The Amari Cooper going to Cleveland. That was basically just like Cleveland deciding to take the contract. Like it was like he was either going to get cut and get a way lesser contract than Cleveland. I mean, I think now it's just pretty much 1 year at like top receiver money for Cleveland. So it's kind of a no-brainer.
It's funny how a team that pays a running back $30 million when he's not even that good anymore ends up having to get rid of a receiver, but we won't relitigate all that.
Yeah, and then the Rams signed Allen Robinson. They traded Robert Woods for nothing, basically, to Tennessee. I like
which I love that for Tennessee. Yeah, Woods is assuming he comes back from injury, he's an incredible run blocker. He's a good receiver. Should help Tennessee out a lot.
Yeah, he adds the experienced second receiver they thought they were getting last year with Julio, with a little less name recognition. But Robert Woods should be great for A.J. Brown. That should really open up things for A.J. Brown and I guess Ryan Tannehill. I mean, that doesn't excite anybody, but they're going to do the same exact thing. They're like the Eagles. They're just going to run it back, feed Derrick Henry. A.J. Brown's awesome, and we're just going to win 10, 11 games with Ryan Tannehill, convince everyone by the time the playoffs start that, we can – go on a run, and then it's like, wait, we have Ryan Tannehill. That's what's going to happen.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, we got to talk about the new overtime rules. So the NFL put out, this is just for the postseason, which I think is dumb. You should do it for the whole year. But new overtime rules. Each team is guaranteed one possession now. So, you won't have the Chiefs-Bills thing where the Chiefs get the ball first, score a touchdown, and it's over. In that scenario, the Bills get the ball. And if it's still tied after the Bills have the ball, then it goes to sudden death. So I've got a question for you. And I think this is interesting. You're the captain for a playoff team. You go to overtime and you win the toss. Are you taking the ball? Yeah. Or are you taking defense?
You're taking the ball because you want to set the tone, first of all. But you're also because now it's sudden death after the first if they both score. Or if they both get a field goal, it's sudden death. So then you get the ball back. But I'm fine with changing it. I wasn't as up in arms as everybody else was in terms of the overtime rules. But if you're going to change it, just do college overtime. Just do it so that it's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and both teams get a chance every time. I think that's by far a better system than whatever this makeshift system that they have here. I don't know. College gave them the formula. So I don't know why we're not just doing what college does. I think it's great. Start at the 30 or the 40, or even if you want to make it the 50, start at the 50 and just, keep going.
Yeah, Ty says, I don't love the new rule, but it's a step in the right direction. So I'm going to tell you the rule I would have done. But first, I want to tell you, so if I win the toss, I think I'm kicking off. I think I'm taking defense first. For the same reason, like in college, you mentioned college overtime. In college overtime, you always want to be second because you know what you need.
Yeah, but you're getting a chance every time. That's
right. But my mentality would be I'm going to play defense first and see if we can hold you to a field goal. So we just need to score a touchdown. But ultimately, if you score a touchdown, we're going to go score a touchdown, and then I'm going to go for two. I'm not giving you the ball back with a chance to kick a field goal and win. So
I like that.
I think, and I'd be interested to see analytic models and stuff when they get built out on this. I know that going for two is like a 55% success rate. You would not want to take ball first and go for two because then you just give up needing to score a touchdown to the other team. But I think what will end up being, now teams aren't going to follow this because we don't even get them to follow fourth down analytics yet. But I think what the analytics will end up modeling out, the optimized approach would be to take defense first and then go for two if you need to. But I'm really interested to see how teams approach that if and when it happens.
The problem with the fourth down analytics thing is because then the coaches that do get killed for it. I mean, Harbaugh and Brandon Staley did, and they got killed for it. And it's like, I kind of defended them for it. There is times like Brandon Staley, I think, went for it like 4 times when it didn't work, and then went for it a 5th time and it didn't work again. If it doesn't work 4 times, maybe at that point you readjust. But I think it used to be that number was around 56%, I believe. And then now that we've seen more attempts where the defense is either expecting it more or preparing for it more, I think that number has went down a little bit to about 54%. I have to look at the numbers, but I read an article about that at the end of this year. So that is an interesting thing with the whole 2-point conversion conversation.
Yeah. So here's the rule that I would have put into place. Here's what I would like to have seen. You get to overtime, like fourth quarter ends, overtime picks up right where the fourth quarter ended, and it's just first team to score wins. So it doesn't come down to a coin flip. There is no coin flip. The team that had the ball at the end of the fourth retains possession, and if they can go score, it's over. I think that makes a lot of sense because it doesn't disregard the entire game and just put it on a coin flip. Because there's still going to be a coin flip advantage to this. Like, you're still, like, whoever wins the coin flip, they have an advantage. And so you get into something like the Chiefs-Bills game where the Chiefs kick the field goal as time expires, so they would be kicking off to the Bills to start overtime because that's where play ended. That makes sense to me, and I think it removes it's just a continuation of the game. There's no resetting. That's the approach I would have preferred. But I like this better than what we had. And I do think it'll be, I can't imagine the conversations on Twitter and sports talk radio after some team goes for 2 and they miss it and they're done in the postseason. I can't imagine all of the stuff that's going to be flying around online. It's going to be wild.
Yeah, no, it'll definitely be fun to see how Twitter melts down about that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's about all I've got for today. Do you got anything else you want to throw out there? Any final thoughts before we get out of here today?
No. Check me out on Saturday, 11 to 1, on Fox PHL The Gambler on iHeartRadio. Should have a good show with a couple good guests this week. And stay tuned to my Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. _. I might have an announcement on a live stream for this weekend on the Painted Lines for a certain wrestling event. So not locked in yet. Want to make sure that I have the guests that I want to get. So, but might be on Sunday. So if you're a wrestling inclined person out there, keep it locked to my Twitter for Sunday night.
So this is an announcement that Mark might make an announcement on Twitter on Sunday. So be sure you check that out, and check out Mark's show on The Gambler. Great stuff. Thank you guys for joining us for episode number 52 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, even though Dibes wasn't here today, he'll be here next time. Be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Those really help us out. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. Mark is at Mark Henry Jr. Dibes is at Mr. Crockpot. So from all of us, from the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.